Welcome back, everybody. It's been about 10 days since Donald Trump was elected the next president of the United States for a second time. And while initially the market jumped about 5%, it's come back down to around the same place it was on Election Day. Warren Buffett has been selling and now sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars in cash, and it has people wondering if a recession or stock market crash is coming. So in this video, we're going to talk about what a second Trump presidency may mean for stocks, what I'm looking for in the stock market for 2025, and how we can prepare ourselves as investors. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, before I get into this video, I want to alert you guys to someone who's probably leading his followers down a bad path. Like, he's a flip-flopper, he has no backbone, he calls himself an investor, but he's really just a trader. He's not a, quote, real investor. And the person that I'm talking about is obviously Warren Buffett. Because yes, in Berkshire's latest 13F filing, it showed that Warren sold 96% of his Ulta stake, which he just acquired 1 quarter before that. So clearly he's not a real investor, he's simply a trader. Now, obviously, I'm kidding about this because these are the exact comments that I get every time that I sell a stock. You flip-flop too much, you're not a real investor, you have no backbone. But look, if Warren Buffett can change his mind within 90 days on a stock, then I think it's okay if you do too. Because the point here isn't to impress people online with your backbone, it's to actually make money for your family, so act accordingly. Okay, so the Donald is back and it's been a whirlwind 10 days. The stock market jumped like 5% and then has come down to about where it was to begin with. Bitcoin jumped from being in the 60s to all-time highs in the 90s within like a week. And Elon Musk is now the new confidant in chief, so to speak. Now, honestly, I'm kind of excited to see what he does with the Department of Government Efficiency, because look, if you've ever worked for the government or as a government contractor or even in a big corporation, you know how much crazy waste there is in terms of money being spent for no real value. So anything we can do to actually clean that up a little bit for taxpayer dollars, I'm all for it. But even though the market has come down a bit from its initial jump, there is something that stands out. Small and mid-cap stocks are starting to get a little better compared to large and mega caps. Certain, quote, Trump trade stocks in my portfolio, like Meta and Taiwan Semi, are down more than others, while banks and consumer discretionary stocks are up as people expect less regulation and taxes that may spur economic activity in the U.S. But stocks are already close to all-time highs, the U.S. deficit is at all-time highs, and the economy doesn't quite feel as strong as some of the numbers may suggest. I mean, this can't possibly continue, can it? Well, if we look at what Warren Buffett is doing, it's clear that he likely has some concerns. He's sitting on over $300 billion in cash, and the Buffett indicator, which compares stock market value to GDP, is at all-time highs, which in general you would think would mean that some big correction was on the way. But the initial reaction to Trump being reelected looked like people were more bullish than ever on continued growth. So what should we really expect for 2025 in terms of the stock market? My general comment anytime people ask me these type of questions is, well, obviously I don't know what's going to happen in 2025, and nobody really does. And while I don't really think we should concern ourselves with what billionaire investors do, in this case, obviously Warren Buffett holding that much cash means that he thinks a correction of some sort is coming. And I will say the one trend that I will be watching closely in 2025 is company earnings, and here's why. We've had some broadening out from the Mag 7 stocks into more small and mid-cap stocks, and some beaten down stocks have come back up recently, really with very little positive news other than the market perception of a more growth-oriented administration. So I'm curious to see if any improvement starts showing up in their actual company earnings in 2025, because right now you have some companies who are crushing earnings, primarily big tech, and companies who are aligned with secular trends like AI, security, and cloud. But then you have a lot of companies who are struggling a bit, and it makes the economy seem a little bit more shaky than maybe some of the headlines would lead you to believe. If those negative numbers continue into 2025, then to me, I think you will see a larger correction, and some of these stocks that have come back up just because may see their way back down. And from my perspective, I said over and over this year that I've added big tech to my portfolio in 2024, even after the big run-up in 2023, because from a growth outlook and fundamentals perspective, they still looked really attractive to me. And at least so far in 2024, the earnings reports have really played that out. And I think they're in a strong position for 2025 as well. So again, if that trend continues, then you might see a reversal of the broadening out that's happened over the last few months and see money go back into those top names if they're continuing to crush earnings. But here are 3 general themes that I'm going to be looking for in 2025 as it relates to the stock market overall. So one, revenue and earnings growth, like we just talked about. Like, is it going to come from the more traditional sectors, or are technology stocks going to continue to rule the day? But number two, will we see the impacts of AI starting to make it into the financial statements for more traditional businesses? Meaning maybe McDonald's or Starbucks or Chipotle are able to automate more of their services and see margin improvements. Or maybe companies are able to reduce their software costs, or even software companies able to reduce their overhead and salaries. And my expectation here is that when we start hearing about these things, it's likely going to snowball and be something that every company is at least discussing or having a strategy for. But I'm curious to see if that starts happening in 2025 or if it's still too soon. And then third, how is the Department of Government Efficiency going to impact the private sector? And what I mean by this is, if we start to cut waste and abuse from government spending, what companies could be impacted? Think about companies that depend on government contracts, companies that depend on infrastructure spending, or areas where government contracts have been on the outrageous side in terms of cost versus benefit. So a company like Boeing, for example. Because as we know, the trend of government spending and percentage of GDP has only gone way up, and now this is going to be in direct conflict with that. While it may take a while for those impacts and changes to hit their actual financials, I think as news starts to come out about what they're finding, then obviously the prices of these stocks are probably going to go way up or way down, and it's just something we need to think about. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of other themes that'll be going on in 2025, but those are just the ones top of mind for me. Now, in terms of specific things related to Trump being president, again, it's hard to know, but here's a quick rundown of some initial thoughts. So number one, Trump tariffs. Now, are they going to be used primarily as a negotiation tactic? As if they actually get implemented, then the question will be what companies and industries are going to be most affected. Now, we've talked about it before, but one place to look at specifically is Taiwan and all the major companies that would be impacted there, including many in my own portfolio. And then number two, will we have war or peace? Because there's multiple conflicts brewing, and depending on if we're able to de-escalate some of these things, will likely have a meaningful impact on the market's outlook for the future. For example, if the Ukraine war gets ended somehow, then the market's likely to go up. If the Middle East conflicts likely quiet down, then the market will likely go up. And if those things take a turn for the worse, well, the market will likely go down. And then third, if they do start to pass policies to spur growth in the economy and American businesses, then obviously that's going to be good for stocks, where we'll likely see an initial bump on the news, but then it's going to be a question of how long it's going to take for that to make their way into their earnings reports. Okay, so that was a lot of different scenarios and what ifs and non-committal stuff. So what do we actually have to do to prepare ourselves for 2025 as investors? Now, this is going to sound super boring because I say it all the time, but each of us need to have our own individual strategy. Like, what is your goal that you're trying to accomplish? What are the criteria that matters to you when picking a company or picking stocks? And what do you actually expect out of each investment? Because here's the thing, we can never really predict exactly what the market's going to do. And if we just look at the most recent history of the past 3 years, it tells that story. We were up to crazy levels in 2021, and then 2022 was a huge crash. Everyone said 2023 was going to be more of the same. We were headed for a recession, but it was one of the best years in the market ever. Then when 2024 came about, again, people said we're heading for a recession. Big tech was overvalued, and yet the market and big tech had another big year. So my point is, what people are saying or expecting about the market isn't nearly as important as all of us as investors really knowing what we're looking for in terms of companies and what criteria we're monitoring to gauge progress. Because remember, while yes, we all want to make money, a stock price really doesn't tell you anything about how a company's performing. Because a good company can underperform from a price perspective for a very long time, or vice versa. And a stock's price action can fluctuate wildly on news that happens or general market sentiment about macro factors. I mean, just look at Cloudflare's price action over the past month or so. It's been insane. So if you're basing your opinion on a company solely on its price, then it's really hard to deal with the natural ups and downs of the market, especially with all the noise that we get from the headlines and media about narratives that seem to change every week. But if you have a defined strategy, you know why you bought a company and what you're looking at to monitor their progress, then it becomes a little bit easier to deal with the volatility in the market because it gives you a focal point of how you're going to make decisions to either buy or sell that isn't only based on price. So for me, the key to 2025 is simply to to keep working my plan and try to anticipate a little bit how any changes may impact the stocks in my portfolio. And just as one example, let's talk about Taiwan Semiconductor. Because Trump has implied that he's going to put pressure on Taiwan, which could impact them with either lower margins due to tariffs or decreased demand or a worsening relationship due to foreign policy changes. Now, I do see this as a risk, but I also think they're a strategic supplier to really important American businesses, and they have locations in the US that are coming online, which makes me believe in the end they're going to figure this out. But it's something that I'm going to be watching and following closely because clearly I have multiple companies impacted by this, not just TSM, but also Nvidia and Apple. But still, at the end of the day, my criteria for Taiwan Semi or Nvidia or Apple is the same as it was earlier in the year. I'm just now incorporating an additional risk to monitor going forward. But overall, I do think that Trump winning was better for stocks than if Harris had won. The challenge is that the current valuation or fundamentals of the market say that it's maybe a bit overvalued and needing a correction right now. And that's why I can't really focus on macro too much. I just buy companies I think have good outlooks, where I understand the risk and I'm willing to accept them, and have future potential that's more aligned with secular trends than any current macro environment or valuation only. That way I can focus on monitoring the metrics important to my thesis and have confidence to hold even if things get a little unpredictable from a price perspective. So what are you all expecting for the stock market in 2025? Let me know down in the comments below. Now, if you want to see where my portfolio is at today, check out my most recent portfolio update, which you can watch by clicking this video right here. Hope you guys have a great day out there. Financial independence is true freedom, so keep building and stacking wins, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.